Alright boys, over on the NA version of the game, it looks like the Las Vegas event is live, otherwise known as Summer 4, and one of the most major servants to come out with Summer 4 is Berserker Musashi, because if you guys aren't in the know, a little servant named Castoria is going to be coming out in about a month and a half, and she's kinda known as the arts enabler, you know, the goddess of the art servants, and it just so happens that Berserker Musashi over here is just looking for her goddess to become the greatest art servant of all time. All that being said, it's going to make it pretty hard to save for Castoria because picking up Berserker Musashi is actually a very, very good idea, especially if you already don't have somebody like Space Ishtar, because Space Ishtar is like one of the other really, really godly servants that pairs very, very well with Castoria. And she won't go back on raid up until like the beginning of next year, so you'd have like half a year where you don't have an ideal servant to pair with Castoria, which makes Berserker Musashi very tantalizing for people to summon for, because if you go ahead and grab her, then you can also just summon for Castoria, and if you can pull both, you'll have a very, very insane team comp that could pretty much carry you through most farming in the entirety of the game. But what makes Berserker Musashi so broken? Well, let's go ahead and dive right into the servant, starting off with her hits, and I'll tell you. When you start off with her hits, you don't see anything super insane. You wouldn't believe that this servant is going to be the insane arch looter that she actually is, because she's only rocking 0.51% NP gain. I mean, let's not even talk about her star regen, it's very, very low at 5%. Sure, she's got double arts cards with 3 hits apiece, and as a berserker, having 2 arts cards is pretty nice. It's a little stand out since most berserkers have a triple buster deck, but still not enough for you to be like, dang, this servant right here, she's gonna be an arts looping goddess. I mean, nothing aside from like the standard 5-hit extra attack really stands out from her hits. You really would be forgiven for looking at her hits and being like, this is a very, very unimpressive servant, right? Because the hits are just not there. Nothing is super, super impressive. Because just like your support casters, Musashi is built off the backs of her skills, because the skills are what pay the bills, and for Musashi, her skills are what are going to allow her to loop and basically function as a servant. So we're going to kind of skip over the hits because the hits aren't as impressive for Berserker Musashi, because she's designed to just loop with her NP, and the skills are what enable that. So moving into skill 1, she is getting 1 hit of evasion and a 50% crit damage buff for 1 turn on a low 4-turn cooldown. And that's pretty much it for this skill. Now, again, you'd be understandable for being like, bro, the hits were unimpressive. The first skill is like nice, I guess. It gives her some survivability. She can dodge one really strong incoming hit, or she can dodge an NP. And if she can produce any stars, she could take advantage of them with a pretty good crit buff. I mean, 50% is the waiver crit buff. So if that gives you a bit of a ballpark of how kind of strong this little crit damage buff is, but it's really nothing super, super impressive. Because, I mean, it seems as though this was designed with Tamamo still in mind. Because keep in mind, when Berserker Musashi first came out, the only real art support type servant was Tamamo. And Tamamo's whole thing is that she has the skill reduction, so she can help you spam your skills. So it seems that maybe this was like designed with Tamamo still being in mind, and you'd be like, oh yeah, I could just keep spamming the dodge, I could keep spamming the crit damage buff. That's what's on a low cooldown. And while it is still nice, especially the dodge for that extra layer of survivability, because she is a berserker and you don't want her getting obliterated, because remember, while she can smack everybody for type advantage, so can everybody smack her for type advantage. It is nice, but Castoria does kind of excel at keeping her allies alive between the targetable invincibility, the solemn defense on the NP, and the ability to cleanse all allies debuff. She just does really, really well at keeping everybody alive. So it's nice, but probably not needed, and really not the biggest part of Musashi's kit. When we move into her second skill, this is when she starts to get the bread, as we would say. Because it's kind of like a weaker and stronger version of Musashi's original skill at the same time. Weaker in the way that it only doubles the number of hits from her arts cards for that turn. Now, as with a normal Musashi, this does actually help her refund a lot of her NP, because it turns those 3-hit arts cards into 6-hit arts cards, and God forbid they get a crit, they are going to refund a metric butt ton of her NP. But here's also the thing that makes it a little bit better in my opinion. she gets a 50% NP gain buff for 3 turns on a 6-turn cooldown. This right here is an absolute killer for any servant that wants to loop with their NP, or just loop period, because this means she's being injected with so much raw NP gain that she's kind of just going to be able to forcibly loop her NP. And this is what takes Musashi from being kind of a normal arts AoE servant to being a godly one. Just getting that much raw NP gain injected into her is insanely good. And I mean, we move over to the 3rd skill, you don't see a battery on this servant, right? The thing is that the reason she's so good with Castoria is that double Castoria can get you to 100% of your NP, and Musashi, with that extra layer of NP gain on the 2nd skill, basically just refunds 100% of her own NP. She can just keep refunding it to the max. And the 3rd skill is just kind of supposed to be there to help her with survivability and even out some damage. I mean, she's getting a solid 30% attack buff for 3 turns, and she's also reducing all enemies' defense by 30% for 3 turns as well. Although keep in mind that if you pop this turn 1 when you're farming, you are going to waste the defense down on the first wave of enemies. So it's up to you to kind of judge if you want to balance using it on wave 1 or wave 3, depending on how strong and how beefy the nodes are. But then if you're actually fighting some difficult enemies, she gives herself Pierce Invincibility for 3 turns, which is insane, because it means that even for boss battles, she can work exceptionally well at bursting them down because she can get around enemy dodges and enemy invincibility buffs, and she gives herself a Guts on top of her dodge to help keep herself alive, meaning she has 2 different ways to keep herself around. The only thing is that she does take away 5k of her HP, which is a little annoying, but I think you'd rather have your Musashi be alive with the Guts than just outright get obliterated. So still kind of worth it, just a little annoying. And then, I mean, if you're farming, it just doesn't matter at all because you're never going to get hit while you're farming. And it just overall bottoms out the servant. It really helps your style of gameplay out a lot, which is either looping all over the place and giving her that little bit of extra damage, or helping her be a burst AoE servant. Burst as in she bursts the enemies down with insanely quick precision. The only thing that's a little disappointing is that if we look at her NP, it's like not the most impressive thing. 4 hits is fine with the buffs that she does have to help her loop. Reducing enemy critical attack chance, I kind of get the philosophy, like, because she can loop her NP so easily, especially with double Castoria, it's kind of like you keep all of the enemy's critical attack chance down by like 90% or something once you start looping your NP a few times. So they really can't crit, but with like no special damage mod, with no other special buffs in here, it's a little lackluster. I mean, a 100 to 200% chance to seal all enemies' NPs for a turn. It's just very, very odd. Why is it not also a special damage mod against Sabers? Why is it not 150% extra damage and chance to seal their enemy NPs for a turn? Like, it's just very, very odd. Like, such a specific NP seal. But unironically, the best part about the NP is probably that it just has the 4 hits, right? Like, everything else is just kind of like, yeah, it's nice if it comes up, I guess, but it's really not all that important. So, I mean, should you be summoning for Berserker Musashi? I can't tell you to not summon. In fact, if you don't have Space Ishtar, you probably should summon. You should probably try your best to get her. Again, don't go broke. You don't want to waste all of your Saint Quartz that you had saved up for Castoria on Berserker Musashi and then be like, well, I have the unit, but now I actually don't have Castoria. Because you at least have some chance to get, you know, Space Ishtar or Berserker Musashi on like the GSSR and stuff. Like, if you miss them here, at least you still have that little sliver of a chance. But Castoria won't be back until next year, which thank God Lysenko and all of them took over, because now these like really, really good servants are having like numerous different raid ups. You don't have to wait an infinite amount of time before like Scotty ever comes back. You know, they've kind of fixed all that stuff. So it definitely makes people like Castoria feel less limited, but still you want to go ahead and get your grubby little mitts on them as soon as possible. And if you're going to be summoning for her, then getting Berserker Musashi is a very, very good idea. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Make sure you leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace. Late, guys.